For those who imagine the devil as some terrifying monster or grotesque creature, you're way off. In the 3 encounters Brandon had with him, what he saw gave the false impression he was dealing with someone extremely polite, classy, even attractive. Brandon was born into a modest family but had always dreamed of striking it rich and becoming a millionaire. When he turned 18, it was clear that if he hadn't been a good-looking guy, he wouldn't have stood a chance with a beautiful girl. Being broke made things even harder. Obsessed with the idea of becoming someone powerful and wealthy, he made up his mind to strike a deal with the devil at 19. At midnight, he built up the nerve, walked out to a crossroads in the middle of a sugarcane field, and called out to Satan 3 times. He waited, and nothing. Tried again, same ritual, 2 more times. Still nothing. So he gave up and went home. 3 days later, he went to a popular bar in town. Can't say the name here to protect the place. He was there with some friends sitting at a table facing the street when a luxury sedan pulled up. Out stepped a man who looked about 30, well-dressed in a black suit straight out of an Al Capone film, blonde hair, blue eyes. The guy was overly polite, sat down with them and sipped whiskey until it was time to go. Brandon worked as a general laborer at a battery factory. The next morning, just as he got to work, that same man walked into his department and headed straight for him. His gaze was so intense it was nearly hypnotic. He came close and said, "Hello, Marcos. We're here. We heard your call." Confused, Brandon asked, "We? Call?" The man smiled, placed both hands on Brandon's shoulders and whispered in his ear that they'd be waiting for him at 6 p.m. Then he turned and walked out. Brandon spent the entire day feeling lost, unsure what had just happened. He asked around, trying to figure out who the man was, but no one had seen him. No one knew what he was talking about. That's when it hit him. The pact. Could it really have worked? He usually clocked out at 5:45 p.m., and as he walked toward the bus stop, that same sedan from before rolled up beside him. The rear passenger door opened, and inside sat the same man from earlier. Brandon checked his watch. Exactly 6 p.m., on the dot. Hard to put into words what he felt in that moment. Not even he could believe that man could actually be the devil. It was a strange cocktail of doubt, fear, and curiosity. Still, he was drawn in by the invitation and decided to get in. Once inside the car, the silence was thick. Eventually, Brandon asked who the man was and what he wanted with him. The response, "We are many. What do we want? We want you to join us." Brandon asked how. The man explained that his body was merely a host, a vessel, and that they were a legion. They wanted him to serve their beloved master, Lucifer. In return, he would receive wealth beyond imagination and indulge in every earthly pleasure while he still had a body. Brandon felt like he'd been hit with Novocaine. He had wanted this: money, riches, women. But now, seeing that it was real, that he might actually be dealing with a legion of demons for the price of his soul, fear started to creep in. He asked about God. If the devil existed, didn't that mean God did too? If he gave away his soul, what would happen when he died? Would he really burn in hell forever? The man laughed, as if amused by Brandon's ignorance. It was like he'd just heard a joke. Then he answered, "Brandon, which God are you talking about? The great rival of our beloved master Lucifer? Relax. All of this is just a giant chess match. Lucifer, the grand architect, only wants what's good: happiness, joy, the pleasures of life. It's that other one, God, who's cruel. He uses suffering and misery to win followers. He even mutilated his own son just to gather more believers. As for hellfire and eternal torment, those are just scare tactics, psychological warfare." Brandon didn't know what to say. He just looked at the man again and asked what he was supposed to do. The man handed him a sleek black briefcase, the executive kind, with shiny gold details, and told him to enjoy the rest of the week. But he made one thing clear: only open the case at home. Brandon did as he was told. He got out of the car and went straight home. His curiosity was off the charts. Once home, he opened the case and was stunned. It was packed with cash and a large envelope. Inside the envelope, there was a thick, textured, brownish piece of paper that gave off a faint but rancid odor, like rotting meat, though subtle, only noticeable up close. At the time, the money in the case was worth around $500,000. He stashed away the strange paper and went out partying. That night, he was the man, loaded, confident, and feeling invincible. He hit the clubs with his friends. They drank, danced, and eventually made their way to a private party. That night was a blur of debauchery, booze, sex, women, pure hedonism until sunrise. In the following days, now with a new car, a new house, and living a life of luxury, Brandon thought the deal was done. As far as he could tell, the pact had been sealed. He was just waiting to see what else was coming. But he was wrong. The deal wasn't complete. One night around midnight, while lounging in bed watching a movie, he saw someone standing in his doorway. A woman. Frozen with shock, he turned on the light and saw her clearly. Beautiful, smiling, and drop-dead sexy. Trying to stay calm, he asked who she was. With a voice that was smooth and seductive, she said she was the administrator of his contract, and that he could call her Empusa. She asked for the envelope with the foul-smelling paper that had come with the money. He handed it over, and she placed the paper on his nightstand, then walked toward him. She was tall, pale, with jet-black straight hair, dark eyes, an intoxicating scent, legs like carved marble, and a deep red evening gown that shimmered under the light. She began kissing him, and though he still felt afraid, he was almost hypnotized, pulled into a desire he couldn't explain. He gave in. What followed was something he never imagined possible. They did things that defied logic. That night, he experienced the most intense pleasure, the wildest sex, and the most explosive climax of his entire life. They stayed together through the night, and by morning, around 6 a.m., the doorbell rang. She was already up, looking flawless, but wearing totally different clothes. Curious, Brandon searched for the red dress. It was gone. She looked at him and said, "Aren't you going to get the door?" He went to see who it was. When he opened the door, a tall man, about 6'6", maybe 20 years old, dressed to the nines, walked right in and sat on his couch. So much was happening that Brandon had stopped asking questions. He just braced himself for whatever came next. Then, Empusa walked up to him, took his right hand, and began sucking on his index finger. It was erotic until he noticed her feet. They were golden, shaped like a horse's hooves. Before he could react, she bit his finger hard, cutting deep. Blood started pouring out. She smeared it on his chest, drawing a symbol, an upside-down cross. At that moment, the man on the couch stood up, holding the same paper that had been on the nightstand. Brandon hesitated, but he couldn't shake the temptation, the comfort, the money. He could feel it in his chest. This was the moment, the one where he'd hand over his soul. As the man walked out the door, Brandon turned to look for Empusa, but she was gone. Vanished, like smoke in the wind. That's when he started to really feel it. His body, his senses. It hit him. That man. That was Satan himself. Days went by, and Brandon's life settled into a new kind of normal. Then about 40 days later, he was invited to a job interview at a multinational company, related to some recent agreement he'd made. When he arrived, he was greeted warmly and taken to a large boardroom. There was a massive round table with around 20 men already seated, except for one chair, clearly reserved for him. Everyone treated him like they'd known him for years. The man at the head of the table stood up and said, "Brandon, take a seat. You're family now. And in this family, we look out for our own." He was told the multinational was more like a hobby, just a front for them to gather when they pleased. In reality, it was one of the most powerful companies in the world. He was handed a bank card with a checking account in his name, already loaded with $5 million. Luxury became his lifestyle. He even started dating a famous actress, on the down low. One day he was taken to a private party in London. What unfolded there was a full-blown orgy, and to his shock, the actress was part of it. That night exposed her own dark secrets. The relationship ended, but Brandon had no reason to complain. He had money, influence, power, everything he'd ever wanted. Later at 22, tired of endless parties and feeling an aching loneliness inside, Brandon met a young woman from a good traditional family. He fell in love with her and married her. They had 2 children. But Brandon lived a double life. She was deeply religious. He, secretly, was a Satanist. Years passed. Then one day a leader from the organization came to him with a demand. He had to sacrifice his own child in honor of Lucifer. That was the breaking point. He refused and told his wife everything. She urged him to repent, to seek God and go to church. Brandon began giving away much of his money to charity, trying to undo what he had done. But then, his wife was kidnapped and killed in a satanic ritual. Terrified something might happen to his children, he sought help from church after church. But before he could fully grieve the loss of his wife, tragedy struck again. His 2 kids became seriously ill. On the way to the hospital, they were in a car crash. Both children died. Brandon survived, but was left paralyzed from the waist down. Now trapped in a wheelchair, drowning in grief and blaming himself for everything, Brandon is haunted daily by shadow-like demons. They move around him like living shadows, bringing a chilling cold to his soul every time they draw near. All the money he once had is gone, donated in a desperate attempt at redemption. He was fired from his executive job for giving too much away. And as if that weren't enough, the whispers started. Demonic voices, constantly echoing in his ears, reminding him he got everything they promised: wealth, pleasure, power. And now, they're waiting to collect. This story stands as a dark warning about the cost of chasing wealth and power at any price, and the danger of getting too close to the shadows. Brandon's tale is a tragic example of just how steep the price can be. See you in the next video.